Just after 5 p.m. on a quiet Monday in Sydney, a message flashed across Teresa Marsden's phone. Four short sentences that sent her world into freefall. I love you. I'm sorry. I'm not happy. The text came from her daughter, Renee. Then nothing. Calls went unanswered. Messages went unread. As daylight faded, Teresa searched frantically, hoping for any sign of where her daughter had gone. By that night, police located Renee's car abandoned near the edge of one of Sydney's most infamous cliffs. But the question wasn't just where she was. It was what had brought her there. What unfolded next wasn't simply heartbreaking. It was far darker and far more twisted than anyone could have imagined. Let's dive into today's case. Renee Marsden entered the world on October 15, 1992, in Sydney, New South Wales, a city defined by its glittering harbor and iconic opera house. She was the beloved daughter of Teresa and Jamie. But when Renee was only 2, her parents separated, reshaping her early childhood. Life shifted again when Teresa met Mark Marsden. By the time Renee turned 6, she and her mother had moved in with him, and in 2000, Teresa and Mark married, creating a new, blended family. Together, they welcomed 3 more children, Luke, Jake, and Monique, Renee's younger half-siblings. The Marsden home was often described as warm, tightly bonded, and full of affection. Renee flourished in that environment, thriving under the support and stability her family provided. And at the center of her world was her mother, Teresa. Their connection was exceptionally close, a relationship rooted in deep trust, constant communication, and unconditional love. At 18, Renee made a deeply meaningful choice. She legally became a Marsden, taking the surname of the man who had lovingly raised her. By then, she had grown into a vibrant, outgoing young woman, remembered for her sunny disposition, genuine kindness, and a smile that could light up a room. Friends and family often described her as the type of person who made everyone around her feel welcomed and valued. One of Renee's longest connections was with a girl named Camila Seiden, a friend she had known since their early school days. But as they entered their teenage years, the dynamic between them began to shift. Their once simple friendship grew tense, layered with conflict and emotional strain. At one point, Renee told her mother that Camila had pulled her hair and hit her, an incident that genuinely frightened her. Yet, despite the turmoil, the relationship didn't fully dissolve. It continued in a complicated push and pull, marked by Camila's increasingly possessive behavior toward Renee. Rumors eventually began circulating about whether Renee and Camila had once shared a brief romantic relationship, though nothing was ever officially confirmed. Whatever the truth, their friendship gradually weakened, until, years later, life brought them back into each other's orbit. The reconnection felt natural, and they grew close again, though the past complexities still lingered beneath the surface. As Renee stepped into adulthood, she explored her interests and ambitions. She trained as both a receptionist and a hairdresser, ultimately finding her passion in the latter. Colleagues describe her as hardworking, upbeat, and excited for what lay ahead. She even talked about moving in with a cousin, a milestone she viewed as the next step toward independence. Her future seemed bright, structured by dreams she was actively pursuing. Around 2008, while working at a beauty salon, Renee met a young man named Angus John. What started as a routine haircut quickly turned into something more. Angus found himself returning to the salon frequently, drawn not just by the services, but by Renee herself. Their connection was instant, their chemistry undeniable, and soon they were inseparable. Their relationship moved quickly, full of intensity and youthful certainty. In a moment of pure devotion, the couple even drafted a written agreement outlining their imagined future together, 4 children and a Labrador. Angus would later describe that period as the happiest time of his life. But in April 2010, everything changed. Their once blissful romance faced a heartbreaking and unexpected shift. Renee soon stumbled across a series of text messages that suggested Angus might have been unfaithful. He insisted he hadn't cheated, but the seeds of doubt were already planted. Feeling hurt, betrayed, and unable to trust him, Renee made the painful choice to end the relationship. The breakup devastated her. Even weeks later, she was struggling, emotionally raw, withdrawn, and clearly heartbroken. That's when Camila stepped in with what seemed like a kind gesture. Seeing her friend in so much pain, she told Renee she wanted to introduce her to someone, a 24-year-old man named Braden Spiteri. Camila explained that she had dated Braden in the past, but the relationship was long over and they had stayed on good terms. To Renee, that reassurance was enough. She didn't question it. Camila showed her a photo of herself with Braden, and Renee was instantly curious. Not long after, Camila handed over his phone number and social media details, setting in motion a connection that would dramatically reshape the course of Renee's life. And so a new chapter unfolded, one built not on face-to-face moments, but on glowing screens, late-night messages, and the kind of digital intimacy that grows quickly when someone is desperate to feel seen. Though Renee and Braden had never met in person, their online relationship intensified at remarkable speed. Then tragedy struck, or at least that's what Renee was told. Braden claimed he'd been involved in a catastrophic motorcycle accident. His best friend, riding as a passenger, had died. Braden said he survived, only to be sentenced to 2 years in prison for his role in the crash. Despite being incarcerated, he continued messaging Renee constantly. He said his wealthy family had smuggled a phone into the facility, though phone calls and visitations were supposedly impossible. He also claimed he'd given up his visitation rights to reduce his sentence, a detail that didn't entirely make sense, even to Renee. But when your heart is involved, logic has a way of dimming. And Renee wanted to believe him. Despite never hearing Braden's voice or seeing him face to face, Renee held tightly to the digital companionship that had helped pull her out of heartbreak. By 2011, she finally confided in her mother, Teresa, sharing the details of her relationship with this man in prison whom she adored. Teresa was hesitant, alarmed, even by the idea of her daughter dating someone she'd never met, especially someone behind bars. But every time Renee spoke about Braden, she radiated happiness. And for a mother, seeing her daughter smile again was enough to quiet her doubts, at least for a moment. That fragile peace didn't last. One afternoon, Teresa messaged Renee on social media. The response came quickly, but it wasn't from her daughter. It was Braden. Teresa immediately felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She told him bluntly that she had no interest in speaking with him and wanted to talk to Renee directly. That's when she learned the truth. Renee had given Braden full access to her personal account. The revelation set off alarm bells. Tension escalated further when Teresa liked a photo of Angus, Renee's ex-boyfriend, on social media. Braden reacted instantly and aggressively, sending Teresa accusatory messages implying she was disloyal, inappropriate, and even a bad mother for maintaining any sort of online connection with Angus. For Teresa, the intrusion crossed a line. Something about Braden's behavior felt deeply wrong, but Renee, blinded by affection and trust, couldn't see it yet. Renee and Braden's relationship stretched out over roughly 18 months, an intense, consuming digital romance that seemed to deepen with every passing week. Together, they mapped out a future that felt real to Renee. Marriage, a home, a life built side by side once he was released from prison. At just 20 years old, she was already envisioning her wedding day. She told friends and family that Braden wasn't just a boyfriend. He was her soulmate. In January 2012, so convinced of their shared destiny, Renee went to a tattoo parlor with Camila and had Braden's name inked across her chest, a permanent mark for a relationship that had never existed beyond screen. But soon after, everything began to fracture. Braden's messages shifted in tone. His jealousy intensified. He grew possessive and controlling, watching Renee's online activity obsessively and demanding more of her time and emotional energy. The bubbly, open young woman her family knew began to withdraw. She became quieter, more anxious, shadowed by someone she had never even met. Still, she clung to the promise that kept her going, Braden's August release date. It was the light at the end of a long, confusing tunnel. But when August came and went with no release, no explanation that made sense, Renee was crushed. People close to her later recalled that she spiraled into deep emotional pain. The weight of the disappointment, the confusion, and the constant manipulation took a devastating toll. At one point, she reportedly attempted to take her own life by overdosing on pills, a moment that terrified everyone who loved her. Seeing how fragile she had become, Teresa and Mark gently but firmly urged her to end the relationship. Eventually, Renee agreed. She let go of Braden and focused on trying to rebuild her life. Not long afterward, she began seeing a co-worker named Ian, a man 12 years older, steady, grounded, and nothing like the whirlwind she'd just escaped. The relationship with Ian had seemed like a fresh start, a calmer, healthier direction for Renee. But the peace didn't last. Braden's presence, so long a shadow over her life, crept back in. Ian began receiving threatening messages from Braden, messages that made it clear the past wasn't finished with Renee. He confronted her, telling her he wouldn't stay in a relationship where an ex was harassing him. He urged her to cut ties completely. But Renee couldn't bring herself to do it. Despite everything, she still believed Braden was her true love. So she ended things with Ian and slipped back into contact with a man who had already caused her so much pain. On Monday, August 5th, 2013, that morning unfolded like any other. Renee woke up, followed her usual routine, and went to work. She came home in the early afternoon. Nothing unusual on the surface. But Teresa sensed something was different. Renee was quiet, irritable, and closed off in a way that didn't feel like her. Worried, Teresa asked if she was okay. Renee gave a quick yes and retreated to her room. A short time later, Teresa's phone buzzed with a message that made her blood run cold. It was from Braden. He claimed Renee had been making threats to harm herself and urged Teresa to keep an eye on her. Panicked, Teresa rushed to her daughter's room and showed her the message. Renee admitted she'd seen it too, but insisted Teresa shouldn't worry. She said she and Braden were done for good. On the outside, it appeared calm. Inside, something much darker was building, something Renee wasn't saying out loud. Later that evening, Teresa checked on Renee and found her in her room, getting ready and doing her makeup. Renee explained that she was going out to dinner with friends from work, away, she said, to distract herself and clear her mind. Though uneasy, Teresa accepted the explanation, hoping her daughter was simply trying to lift her spirits. Then, around 5 p.m., everything changed. Teresa's phone buzzed with a message that would shatter her world. It was from Renee, for simple lines that no parent should ever read. I love you. I'm sorry. I'm not happy. Panic surged through Teresa. She called Renee again and again, but there was no answer. Desperate, she rushed to the home of one of Renee's close friends and showed her the message. The friend's response was immediate and clear. Call the police. Authorities were notified, and a search began, including attempts to track Renee's phone. But as night fell, there were still no signs of her. The silence was crushing. Frantically searching for any clue, Teresa reached out to Camila, hoping she might know something. Camila admitted she had also received a strange message from Renee, expressing love and apology, though the context was unclear. When Camila asked what was happening, Teresa revealed that Renee hadn't come home and was now missing. Camila didn't hesitate. She offered to help search. Together with Teresa, they went from place to place where Renee might have gone, calling her name and hoping for a sign. But every location was empty. The night stretched on, heavy with fear and uncertainty, and the question lingered. Where was Renee, and what had driven her to vanish? Later that evening, around 9 p.m., the police called with an update that made Teresa and Mark's hearts sink. Renee's car had been found, abandoned near a cliffside in Sydney, a location infamous for its danger. They rushed to the scene, their minds racing with fear and hope. In the darkness, they called out her name, desperate for any sign, any response. For 2 hours, they combed the area, clinging to the faintest possibility that she might still be nearby. But as night deepened, there was nothing. Defeated but unwilling to give up, they returned home, only to rise at first light on August 6th and head straight back to the cliff, determined to continue the search. It was then that Teresa saw something that made her blood run cold. Near the edge of the cliff lay a pair of shoes. She knew instantly. They were her daughter's. Trembling, she bent down and picked them up, overwhelmed by a mix of grief, disbelief, and dread. Before she could process the weight of what she held, a nearby police officer stepped forward, gently but firmly taking the shoes from her hands and returning them to their original spot. He asked her to step back. By that point, the authorities were already certain of what had happened. The chilling reality settled over the scene. Renee was gone, and the tragedy that Teresa had feared was now undeniable. Renee, they were told, had likely ended her life at that very spot, one tragically known for similar incidents. Police gently urged the Marsdens to return home, explaining that they believed Renee had made a final, irreversible choice. No body was ever recovered, but soon, surveillance footage from a nearby camera surfaced, offering a heartbreaking glimpse of her final moments. The video showed Renee walking toward the cliffside fence. She climbed over it and approached the edge, moving slowly, hesitantly. Then she stepped back. She appeared to send several messages on her phone before throwing it out of frame. Moments later, she walked again toward the precipice, then vanished from sight. It was a devastating image, one her family could barely process. The idea that Renee had been suffering so deeply, so silently, was unbearable. In their grief, Teresa and Mark focused on the person they believed had driven her to that breaking point, Braden. They sent him a message, holding him responsible for the anguish that consumed their daughter. But they received no response. With nowhere else to turn, they reached out to the only person who had ever known Braden in the real world, Camila Seiden. When Teresa pressed Camila for answers, her responses were puzzling. Camila insisted that Braden was also suffering, a claim that left Teresa bewildered. How could Camila possibly know that? She said Braden had called her directly, but the story felt inconsistent, fragile under scrutiny. When Teresa asked Camila to hand over Braden's phone number to the police, her demeanor shifted sharply. Agitation overtook her, and she began speaking in strange, almost nonsensical ways. Then, in a shocking twist, she turned the tables entirely, accusing Renee of being violent and manipulative, claiming that she had been the real victim all along. Camila insisted that Renee had needed psychological help, painting a version of reality that was almost unrecognizable to Teresa. Meanwhile, police pressed on with the investigation. Renee's phone was missing, thrown, presumably, into the ocean that day. But inside her parked car, they discovered something unexpected. Among a collage of photos featuring Braden lay Renee's previous cell phone, the one she had replaced just months before her disappearance. At the time, officers returned the phone along with her other belongings, unaware of its significance. Little did anyone know that device would soon become the key to unraveling the tangled truth behind Renee's final months and the dark forces that had shadowed her life. Luke, Renee's 13-year-old brother, had a friend with a knack for technology. Together, they managed to access her old phone using specialized software, and what they uncovered was shocking. The device contained over 11,000 text messages spanning just 3 months, from March to June 2013. The messages included conversations not only between Renee and Braden, but also between Renee and Camila. Determined to understand the scope of what they were seeing, Mark began meticulously analyzing the data. He created a spreadsheet, cross-referencing dates and times, looking for patterns. That's when something unsettling emerged. Messages from Camila and messages from Braden never overlapped. They were always sequential, one following the other, never sent at the same time. A chilling realization began to form. Mark brought his findings to the police, who quickly confirmed his fears. The messages that had supposedly come from 2 separate individuals, Braden and Camila, had in fact originated from 2 different phones, but both from the same building, the same address. Yet Braden was supposed to be incarcerated 2 hours away from Sydney. The reality was far darker and far more deceptive than anyone could have imagined. The truth, when it finally emerged, was staggering. Braden had never existed. He was a complete fabrication, a carefully constructed illusion, crafted and maintained entirely by Camila. For 18 months, Camila had manipulated Renee through this fake identity, using 2 separate phones to sustain the illusion of Braden's presence. The man Renee had loved, planned a future with, and tattooed across her chest was nothing more than a shadow conjured by someone she once considered a best friend. The question that haunted everyone was obvious. Why? What could possibly drive someone to inflict such sustained emotional torment on a person they claimed to care about? As the story unfolded, family, friends, and others close to the 2 young women began to speak out. They painted a picture of Camila as obsessive and controlling, recalling how she would call Renee repeatedly, sometimes up to 20 times in under an hour. In the months leading up to Renee's death, she had started to pull away, creating distance from the relentless pressure. She confided in Teresa that she was exhausted by Camila's manipulation and constant attempts at dominance. Determined to reclaim her life, Renee decided to end the friendship once and for all. The final act, it seemed, may have been Camila's calculated revenge, a cruel, unthinkable culmination of obsession, deception, and control that left a bright young life shattered. On August 5, 2013, the very day Renee disappeared, Camila sent one final message to her, again pretending to be Braden. The message was short but devastating. He was ending the relationship. That single message set off a storm. Investigators later confirmed that Renee exchanged 91 messages with the fabricated Braden that day, a digital volley of heartbreak and confusion. The exact content of these messages remains unknown, shrouded in mystery, but their volume and timing spoke to the emotional intensity Renee was enduring. In a moment of desperation, Renee called the prison where she believed Braden was being held. As anyone might have guessed, there was no record of an inmate by that name. Braden did not exist in any official capacity. As the Marsden family and police worked to reconstruct the timeline, their attention turned once again to Camila. At first, she denied any involvement, but the evidence was mounting. Phone records, message logs, and surveillance footage all painted a damning picture. Even so, Camila had been careful, taking steps to obscure her actions and maintain the illusion. The trail was there, but uncovering the full scope of her manipulation would require painstaking detective work. Camila had meticulously destroyed the phone and SIM card she used to impersonate Braden, erasing nearly all traces of the critical conversations, especially those exchanged on the day Renee ended her life. Recovering the full record of messages proved nearly impossible. Despite these technological obstacles, law enforcement reached a chilling conclusion. Camila had manipulated and psychologically tormented Renee for months, crafting and sustaining a fictional persona in a classic case of catfishing. The emotional abuse had been relentless, calculated, and devastating. Yet at that time in Australia, there were no laws specifically addressing this kind of identity deception. Because Camila had not extorted Renee or gained financially from her actions, prosecutors were unable to bring formal criminal charges. For the Marsdens, this was a crushing blow. They struggled to comprehend that someone could methodically destroy another person's life and seemingly walk away with no consequences. Determined to seek justice, Mark and Teresa Marsden launched a relentless campaign to have the case reopened. Their persistence and advocacy would eventually pay off. 7 years later, they finally saw a breakthrough in their long fight for accountability. In 2020, authorities finally agreed to hold a formal forensic inquest into Renee's death. Camila was granted immunity in exchange for telling the truth, but she remained cold, distant, and largely uncooperative. During the proceedings, she admitted to pretending to be Braden, yet tried to justify it in the most bizarre way possible. She claimed that Braden had been a character she and Renee had created together, an invented boyfriend they supposedly shared. The statement shocked everyone in the room, both for its audacity and its cruelty. Investigators presented the first message Renee had received on August 5th, the one that ended the relationship, as a key piece of evidence. Forensic experts testified that this message, sent under Braden's name, was likely the final emotional blow that drove Renee to her tragic decision. Then came an even more haunting revelation. A school-era email written by Camila to Renee, read aloud in court. In it, Camila professed a suffocating, obsessive love, warning that she was too in love and would chase Renee if she ever tried to leave. The email revealed a pattern of emotional control and manipulation that had begun years before the catfishing, painting a chilling portrait of a young woman who had been psychologically dominated long before the tragic events of 2013. Despite the overwhelming evidence of harm, the court ultimately concluded that Camila could not be criminally charged. Her actions, though undeniably cruel and psychologically abusive, did not fall under any specific criminal statute in Australia at the time. The decision sparked widespread outrage, not only from Renee's family, but also from the public, many of whom had followed the case closely. In the years following, Camila continued her life seemingly untouched by the consequences of her actions. She married, had children, changed her appearance, and lived nearby, sometimes crossing paths with Mark and Teresa in supermarkets and public places as if nothing had ever happened. But the Marsdens refused to be silenced. Channeling their grief into action, they became tireless advocates for legal reform, determined to protect others from the kind of prolonged psychological abuse that had claimed their daughter's life. In time, another piece of the deception was uncovered: the photographs Camila had used to construct Braden's identity. They did not belong to a real Braden at all. They belonged to a man named Cameron Lang. This final revelation underscored the depth of Camila's manipulation and the elaborate lengths she had gone to in fabricating a life that never existed. When a story finally went public, Cameron Lang saw his image on the news and spoke out. He had never met Camila and had no connection to her. The photo, he recalled, had likely been taken years earlier during a casual night out at a bar or club. Yet Camila had seized that fleeting moment and transformed it into an entire fabricated persona, using it to manipulate and control her best friend. Renee Marsden's story is far more than a tale of deception. It is a chilling reminder of how trust can be twisted and how digital manipulation can escalate into emotional abuse. In today's world, where online relationships are increasingly common, her death serves as a stark, painful wake-up call. Behind every message, every profile, every smiling photo, there could be a lie. And when a lie becomes a weapon, the consequences can be irreversible. Renee is gone, but her name continues to resonate. Her story fuels conversations about emotional coercion, psychological control, and the urgent need for legislation that keeps pace with modern abuse. It stands as a warning and a call to action. No one should suffer in silence, and no one should be destroyed by a friend hiding behind screen. Thanks for listening to Bleak True Crime. If you're fascinated by real-life mysteries and chilling cases from around the world, explore our channel for more in-depth true crime stories. Hit subscribe so you don't miss our next gripping investigation.